I don't know if the 6'2" and under guard is at a premium no more as a starter. Maybe as a backup, you can't get picked on defense. That's the thing, because we play such the pick-on game that they will really, literally, if you can't guard, they will bring you up every play. If you want a chance to beat the Cleveland Cavaliers, you are going at Darius Garland most of the time on the defensive side. That's not saying that he's going to get scored on every time, but sometimes he's just small. Right. He's just 6'1", 6'2" sometimes.
Believe it or not, basketball wasn't always ruled by giants. In fact, in the earliest days of the game, people actually thought that being tall was a disadvantage. Today, we know that this is obviously not true, but for most of the time that this game has been around, there has always been a place for the short kings. The little guys, the Davids amongst Goliaths. Even someone like Muggsy Bogues, who is shorter than the average person, let alone basketball player, managed to have a successful NBA career that spanned over a decade. That's not to say that these shorties are common. They're definitely the exception to the rule of basketball is for tall people. But in the NBA today, it seems like there's as little space as there has ever been for the little guy. Gone are the days of the 5-foot-something players earning a place in the league. Now it's just a novelty if a player that size even sees the floor. In fact, in the NBA right now, there are exactly 2 players listed as sub 6 feet tall, Jordan McLaughlin and Ryan Nembhard, both of whom went undrafted to start their NBA careers. Now, if you're short in the NBA in 2020 something, number one, you can't be that short, like nothing flirting with being typical human-sized, and number two, and most importantly, you need to basically have a basketball superpower to have a consistent spot on an NBA team. In the past, you could be a superstar as a small guard. Even if it's almost impossible to win a championship, it's ultimately still a possibility. Jerry West became the NBA logo at 6'3".
West throws it up.
Isaiah Thomas led the Bad Boy Pistons to back-to-back titles at 6'1".
All the way up. Go!
Allen Iverson was an icon for an entire generation at 6 foot flat.
Oh, Allen Iverson, what a move!
And Stephen Curry has an argument for being the most influential basketball player of all time, is the only unanimous MVP in NBA history, and has 4 championships to his name, while being just a tick shorter than me. But I think that Steph is the endling of the superstar small guard species, the last of his kind. And it would seem that we have reached an extinction level event as evidenced by the decline of Trae Young and Ja Morant, 2 players who have seen their value plummet despite being some of the most talented players in the world. Just a few years ago, they were on the cusp of true superstardom. Now, one is being traded as a salary dump in the middle of his prime, with the other likely on his way to a similar fate. So without further ado, welcome to NBA Deep Dive. Hello everybody, Sick Buckets here, and while the product that I'm advertising today cannot help you with the type of virus that I am currently dealing with, it can protect you from scammy internet viruses online, as well as many other things. A couple of years ago, I fell for a scam online, and it was a massive, massive headache. The kind that cost me a lot of money, a lot of time, and a lot of stress. Because of that, I try to be a lot more careful now, and today's video partner, NordVPN, is a great help. They have unique features like threat protection. That means phishing attacks where scammers present themselves as someone that you trust to make you do something stupid are no longer threats, because NordVPN can recognize many malicious links and warn you about dangerous websites. And right now, if you use my link in the description and the pinned comment, nordvpn.com/rustybuckets, then you can get NordVPN's best deal. Plus, when you choose their 2-year plan, you will get a bonus additional 4 months on top of it. It's all backed by a 30-day money-back guarantee. To get that exclusive deal, head over to my link, nordvpn.com/rustybuckets, and get NordVPN today. That special offer is available in the link in the description, and I will also be putting it on screen. Thank you to NordVPN for partnering on today's video.
If you're the smallest player on the floor in a game where being tall is almost a given, there are a lot of things that you will just inherently not be good at. Like, it's really hard to be a real bruiser on the glass. It's unlikely you're going to be blocking all that many shots. In fact, you're likely going to be getting blocked more than anybody. So when this many weaknesses are nearly foundational to being a small guard, whatever strengths you do have need to be exceptional. And what advantage does a small player have that bigger players do not? Well, typically shooting, ball handling, speed, and passing. In ancient history, these sorts of advantages are what made people doubt that giants had a place on the basketball court. But this is less so the case in the modern NBA, where even guys like Andre Drummond are shooting threes now. Even still, the best shooters in the NBA are almost always some of the shortest players. In the 24-25 season, all but one of the top 20 players in made threes that year played either point guard or shooting guard, and all but one of them were 6'5" or below. Taller players tend to be less coordinated. Smaller players also tend to be more capable of getting a shot off quickly. But it's also because guards simply can't afford to not have that edge. In the case of Trae Young, his shooting talent is very clear, even if it sometimes seems unrefined and inconsistent. Ice Trae entered the league in a loaded draft class and had obvious superstar potential. He was a 5-star recruit out of high school before committing to Oklahoma, where in his 1 year in college, he led the NCAA in both points and assists per game. His superstar potential was so obvious that the Atlanta Hawks chose him over the 6'6" Luka Doncic by trading down from 3rd to 5th overall in 2018. Young showed signs of being a player with shades of Steve Nash and Stephen Curry, two of the very best small guards of all time, because he had a superpower that those two also had: finesse.
Trae Young slams on the brakes. Bullock needs some new brake pads after that.
Down to 103 is Trae. No looks it behind the head to Capella.
What an answer for this man right here. Oh my goodness. Oh, no, Young with a little shake of his shoulder.
No, he didn't.
5 seconds, 4, gets around Zion, into the paint. Lob to Capella.
As Young fires from way downtown and takes him out.
And the appropriate, you are in the garden, you might as well take a bow.
As of today, Trae has more or less lived up to the hype. Sure, he hasn't made a finals appearance like Luka, but he's a 4-time All-Star coming off of a season where he led the league in assists, while also dropping 24 points per game, his lowest scoring average since his rookie season, which is saying a lot. From a floater and mid-range, his percentages are well above average, and from 3, he's had some spectacular shooting seasons and some not so spectacular ones. But at the same time, his raw numbers don't paint a full picture. Trae takes a very low volume of catch-and-shoot threes, which are typically easier to make. Instead, he takes difficult, contested shots off of step backs, oftentimes from 5 feet behind the line. It's one of those skills that only a handful of players had at the time that he was drafted, and it remains pretty rare to this day. As much as people bitch about everyone trying to be like Steph in today's game, there are very few players with a shot diet similar to Trae's. You can question the quality of a lot of these shots, and you would be right to. But at the end of the day, opposing teams still have to play tight defense on him even when he's a mile away from the basket, because they know that he is quite capable of lighting them up even when he has a little space. As a result, despite not being a big player or even a remarkable athlete, he can weave his way in and out of the paint by leveraging his shooting ability. But shooting ability alone isn't what makes Trae Young Trae Young. That's why I called it finesse, because it's really the best word to describe it. He has such incredible touch that it creates a world of problems for the other team. Maybe my favorite thing that Trae Young does, better than anyone honestly, is what I will call the float lob option, or the flob. It's basically a quick read and react play where Trae's elite touch puts the defense in a situation where they're damned if they do, damned if they don't. See, a lot of the times when Trae is coming off of a ball screen, he'll force his defender to stay behind him, basically eliminating him from the play and creating a 2-on-1 situation in the paint. This is often called putting his man in jail, and you can see why, it's pretty obvious. The other defender in this action is left to defend both Trae Young with the ball and the screener who is rolling to the basket. Trae will go up for what looks like a floater, maybe the quickest shot in the game of basketball. The defender leaves their feet to contest the shot just for Trae to turn his wrist and lob it up to the roll man. Or, because the defender knows there is a high likelihood that there is a lob coming, they don't jump, and now Trae just has a completely uncontested floater. He puts the defense in an impossible situation where in just the split second it takes to go from dribbling to the flob, the defender has to pick their poison. Ja Morant, on the other hand, has an entirely different superpower: athleticism.
McConnell, pick and roll, Morant. Avery Bradley with the deflection against Trae. Oh, Morant! What an incredible block!
He hits his elbow on the backboard. That's what freed the ball.
Morant off the bounce. 360 spin and the finish. Oh, he did not do that.
Morant goes on where? Step back. And it goes! Ja Morant wins it for Memphis.
Ja has the type of athleticism that athletes dream about having. He's known primarily for his skywalking dunks, but he also is incredibly explosive in other ways. He has a lightning quick first step and moves stupid fast. He has the kind of verticality that his airness did, where he can start his jump, get his opponent to leave their feet, and wait for them to land before he even does anything with the ball.
Well, he coming down the right side. He takes off. David Robinson coming this way. So Mike just cuffed, and he just looked at him.
In the air.
And he kept looking. He kept looking. He kept looking.
Morant spins and hits again. Holy cow!
But Ja was a late bloomer. Where Trae Young was a 5-star recruit, Morant was a 0-star high school player who ended up going to Murray State, where his basketball talent was developed alarmingly fast.
Tournament's 2 leading scorers, and Morant hammers it home. It's a jaw jam.
He was put on NBA draft boards with comparisons to Russell Westbrook, John Wall, and Trae Young. One 2019 Bleacher Report article reads, Morant moves like De'Aaron Fox and distributes like Trae Young and Rajon Rondo. Despite being undersized, Ja is capable of blowing by just about everybody, as he is faster with the ball than most players are without it. And after he gets deep in the paint, he can rise above the trees and render his height disadvantage irrelevant. In his peak season as a finisher at the rim, he was the NBA leader in points in the paint. That is absolutely absurd. When you look at the points in the paint leaders historically, it's just a bunch of big men, not just players who are of average NBA height. It's usually dudes who are 6'10 plus, and Ja outdid all of them. I mean, he even outdid Giannis Antetokounmpo, who is averaging 30 at this point. Ja had a lot of offensive limitations with his questionable jump shot that we will discuss later, but at his best, you'd rarely notice this weakness, as Ja was getting what he wanted whether the defense was sagged off or not. Similar to the flob, Ja also has an unconventional go-to move in the paint that takes advantage of the attention he draws from the defense to create opportunities for his teammates. See, for eons and eons, coaches told players at all levels that passes should be made with both feet planted on the ground so that you can control the pass as much as possible. Ja Morant said, "Fuck that." Nobody has ever done the jump pass in basketball quite like Ja Morant. His power driving to the rim and getting airborne gives him court vision in the paint that basically no other small guard has ever had access to. His specialty, besides for posters and tough layups, is feeding his teammates the ball while his feet are off of the ground, usually at the last possible second. Using their S-tier athleticism and finesse respectively, both Morant and Young have made multiple All-Star teams, and each of them have one All-NBA nod, Morant even getting some stray MVP votes in his peak seasons. These guys have accomplished a lot already as individuals, especially for small guards, and there has been signs of potential team success along with it. Both have taken the franchise that drafted them to really promising heights really early. Trae led the Atlanta Hawks to a conference finals appearance in 2021. Ja Morant the year after was absolutely frying the Warriors before getting hurt in round 2. Trae and Ja both did this at the age of 22, giving people really high hopes for their futures. Fans had reason to believe their team drafted a guy who could be the best player on a championship team one day. But fast forward just a few years, and that hope isn't really in the air anymore. Ja has been down a bumpy-ass road the last few seasons, both as a person and a player. So much so that he might be on his way out of Memphis, and Trae's team was so clearly better without him that they traded him for pennies on the dollar despite him being ostensibly in the middle of his prime. Ja Morant was being anointed by many as the future face of the league. But now he's arguably not even the best player on his team, with some wondering if they'd be better off without him. Trae Young was being compared to the likes of Steph Curry and Steve Nash, and now he's a Washington Wizard, so clearly the Hawks felt that they were better off without him. So what changed? Why has the opinion on these two as basketball players soured so much in such a short amount of time? As NBA fans, we tend to go through a familiar cycle with players as they are breaking onto the scene. Whenever a young player ascends to the upper echelon of the league, all anyone can say about them is praise. Oh my god, they're so talented. Oh my god, they're so fun to watch. And we let a lot of the issues with their game get swept under the rug. Oftentimes, the justification for this is youth and potential. Obviously, these guys have some weaknesses in their games, but these players are young, they can figure it out. That is somewhat true, but let's be real, a lot of the time, it's cope. And I find when people like a young player, they tend to speak way too confidently about said player overcoming their weaknesses, as if that necessary development is a foregone conclusion. It's fine to believe that these things can be changed, but not to be overly certain of it. The fact is, the signs of the flaws with these two guys were always there. We were just too busy reveling in their superpowers to really care. Ja Morant's athleticism made him the definition of spectacle. Yeah, he can't shoot, like, at all, but dude, look at how he almost dunked on that guy real hard.
Whoa! Morant trying to hammer one over Love, missed the dunk. Big collision between Morant and Love. Both went down back behind the play.
To be fair, he also has had playoff performances to back all of this up, as did Trae Young, but lately we don't have any of that positive to block out the negative. And now their weaknesses are at the center of the discussion surrounding them, swept under the rug no longer. With Ja Morant, we are going to leave the discussion to the basketball side of things for now. If you want my take on the whole gun flashing thing, to make it short, nothing he did was illegal, and it's only really a bad look for people because he's black. Like, straight up, that's the problem. Especially the guns celebration shit. Like, it's totally fine when someone else does it, but now he has this reputation. I don't know, it's just silly to me. I'm not saying that I would have gone around recommending these actions by Ja if I was like his PR guy, but I also think there was a dramatic overreaction to the whole ordeal by the media and the NBA, a reaction that, to me, felt like it was straight out of the David Stern playbook. I don't think flashing guns is cool, but I thought this was America. It's deeply ingrained in our culture. Should it be? No, but it is what it is. Ja Morant's #1 issue on the basketball court is his jump shot. What I mentioned earlier for Trae, the idea that you basically have to be a good shooter to be a great small guard, well, that couldn't ring more true for Ja. This particular limitation has largely squandered his potential. Over the years, his explosive athleticism has seen a decline. How big of a decline is up for debate, but with that has come less and less driving and more shooting, which means less of the very superpower that gave him his status is on display, while his biggest weaknesses are center stage. Many have argued that this is a product of him trying to develop this aspect of his game and him having an unfair whistle. He's even shaded the media to their faces regarding the scrutiny he's gotten for using his athleticism too aggressively, almost blaming them for his change in shot selection. But he said outright that he is less willing to dunk the ball now. He was just lying when he said he was done dunking, period. It's literally like he got the call from Nike and some black vans pulled up outside of his house, so he immediately...
Morant, ball fake.
What did we just see, partner? He said, I'm not going to dunk, but he threw that one through.
But he's definitely been doing it a lot less. The thing is, I would absolutely be in support of Ja improving his outside shooting, and more volume is a decent way to do that. For what it's worth, he has improved his floater and even somewhat improved his mid-range game, but his 3-ball, yeah, that hasn't improved, like, at all. There are better shooting seasons in there than others, but at his absolute best, he peaked at 34% shooting from outside, which is still a touch below league average, and that was on 4.5 3-point attempts per game, which isn't like crazy low, but when you consider that he was overall taking 20 shots a game that year, that's an insanely low 3-point attempt rate, especially out of a small guard. To put that into perspective, in the 21-22 season, the year that he posted these shooting numbers, the average starting point guard attempted 6.15 threes per game, and the average 3-point attempt rate was 43.6, meaning the average starting point guard took 1.65 more threes per game, which isn't that crazy of a difference, but Ja's 3-point attempt rate is exactly half of the league average. For a better representation, let's compare him to other high-volume scoring guards. The average guard, who was taking 18 to 22 shots in the 21-22 season, attempted 7.56 threes, which is a bit higher than 3 more than Ja. He wasn't taking that many threes relative to how much he shot the ball overall. Like, not even close to a normal rate for a guard. And when he did shoot them, he was hitting 1% below the league average. This isn't even factoring in how many of those threes were virtually wide open because the defense was hoping he would take those shots as opposed to driving. And remember, this is Ja's best season from outside. In the following years, his volume would go up a bit, but his percentages would get worse and worse. In the 22-23 season, he shot 4.9 threes a game, hitting 30.7% of them. In the 23-24 season, he only played 9 games, so we'll skip that one. But in the 24-25 season, he shot 5.7 threes per game, and he hit just 30.9%. And this year, through 19 games, he is shooting 23.5% on 4.3 3-point attempts a game. Not only is he not getting better, he's actively getting worse. Now, I can hear you thinking, because I'm inside your head, But Rusty, we've seen similar players find a lot of success in the NBA despite having a bad jumper. You might be thinking of Derrick Rose, or even Russell Westbrook, or if you want a more modern example, you might be thinking of De'Aaron Fox. But here's the thing. Those guys at least had a fairly reliable mid-range game, at least they did in their best seasons. In Derrick Rose's MVP year, he shot 42% from mid-range in general, and in his MVP year, Russ shot 44% from 10 to 16 feet. Those aren't amazing numbers, but it's better than the league average on much higher than average volume. De'Aaron Fox has developed a really solid mid-range game. In his All-Star season in 2023, he shot 48% from 10 to 16 feet, and he was money on his floaters, hitting 55% of them. Ja hasn't developed a mid-range game really at all, even if there has been some marginal improvements. For his career, he shoots 43% from 10 to 16 feet, which is solid in the 2020s. Bear in mind that league average percentages were considerably lower in Rose and Westbrook's MVP seasons, but his floater has never been all that good either, at an average of 42%, and the floater is a shot that he takes nearly as much as a shot right at the basket. Now, another counter you might use is, well, I mean, Giannis is super dominant without a jumper, why can't Ja be? But that's where the small guard of it all comes into the equation. Giannis hasn't needed to develop a jumper because he's a 7-foot wall of muscle that can punish any defense physically. Sag off if you want, he's still going to get a head of steam going to the rim, and there is little you can do to him from there. Contrast that with Ja. Yeah, he just can't do that. He weighs 175 pounds. Giannis has a whole 75 pounds on him. If Giannis runs into a wing, they bounce off of him. If Ja runs into a wing, he bounces off of them. His shooting issues were acceptable when he was leading the league in points in the paint, but Ja has drastically reduced his volume right at the rim year by year. In his first 4 seasons, Ja took 33.4% of his shots from 0 to 3 feet. In his last 3 years, he has taken just 22.8%. And to bring this back to the Derrick Rose example, the other major issue for Ja is the sustainability of this high-flying, lightning-quick play style. It's not easy to play like this for long. Even Russell Westbrook, who has the most longevity from this archetype bar none, he is A, not really a small guard, he is height-wise 6'4", and B, he's fucking jacked. Like, the guy is much bigger than Ja, anywhere from 25 to 30 pounds bigger depending on what's being reported, but subsequently, he absorbs contact better, and frankly, the dude is just an Iron Man. Russ is an outlier, while Ja is much closer to being the rule. Ja rule. Same can be said for Derrick Rose, who fell apart because being that small and throwing yourself to the rim amongst the trees that often will almost inherently result in injury after injury after injury. And even if it's not anything extreme, like in the case of Rose, constant smaller injuries can also pile up, which can result in Ja just not trusting his body and leaning more on the weaker but ultimately safer aspects of his game. To the point where I feel like Derrick Rose barely counts as a what-if because the world where he doesn't have major injury issues was just never going to exist. And if you don't have the skills beyond the athleticism to make you a good player when that athleticism declines, then there is going to be a massive fall-off associated with that. Ja has been awful so far this year. So awful that I'm confident he will bounce back and be better than this. But I find it hard to believe that he hasn't already peaked, which is really sad to say about a 26-year-old player. His athleticism doesn't seem as useful as it once was, and there are no signs of his jumper getting any better. In fact, the signs point to it getting worse. But Trae Young doesn't have this issue. He wasn't that athletic to begin with, and what he did have hasn't gone away. And he's a pretty damn good, if inconsistent, shooter. So why does his reputation seem to be in steep decline as well? Well, many of his issues stem from the defensive end of the floor. Now, Ja is no lockdown defender himself, but his athleticism does somewhat make up for his size limitations on that end. And for what it's worth, being a smaller player doesn't inherently mean that you will be a terrible defender. Chris Paul is a prime example of this, as is someone like Fred VanVleet for a more modern example. And even Muggsy Bogues had his moments defensively because it's pretty easy to steal the ball when you're 3 feet from the ground. But it is becoming harder and harder in today's game due to the more widespread adoption of mismatch hunting. Obviously, the concept of a mismatch is damn near as old as the sport itself. But despite the major advantage that mismatches present, throughout most of history, it was something that more so happened as a matter of circumstance. The plays were not drawn up with the intention of creating the mismatch. If a mismatch existed, it was exploited, but teams didn't actively seek them out. On top of that, the illegal defense rule, which was eliminated in 2001, really discouraged switching, as getting caught out of position would result in a free throw and retaining possession. These days, in the more analytically driven era, teams really search for these mismatches when they have them. But more troublesome for Trae, they intentionally run plays to target these players. It's long been said that on the defensive end in the NBA, you are only as strong as your weakest link, but that has never been more true than it is right now. In the 90s, a player like Muggsy Bogues could play for the entire decade for 2 major reasons. One, the game was less perimeter-oriented. The average NBA team didn't have a guard who was going to hunt for their shot on Bogues the same way that they would now. And 2, because the game was less perimeter-oriented, the spacing was so much worse, and there was always a help defender ready to recover from any mistakes or mismatches on the perimeter. Defenses packed the paint super hard, and it was seen as a victory if teams were taking a bunch of jump shots, because they were usually mid-range jumpers, and no matter how good a player is on those shots, it's a whole hell of a lot less efficient than a layup or dunk. Bogues could thrive because he had Alonzo Mourning on the back line, and if he gave up a jumper, it was usually a 2-point jumper, so not that big of a loss. Even if it's someone like Michael fucking Jordan, teams would take a jumper over anything in the paint back then without hesitation. In the 1993 finals, Dan Marley couldn't stay in front of Black Jesus to save his life, so the Suns put Kevin Johnson on him, a much shorter defender who Jordan just shot over every time. He was automatic on those shots, but it was still better for the Suns than what was happening before the rare switch, something they did not do a lot back then. Today, well, for one, Trae hasn't had many teammates who are exceptional defenders, but more importantly, there is so much more space that it is a lot harder for defenses to recover on a mistake made by Trae Young. Even if they recover on the initial mistake, that results in some other mistake. If this chain of mistakes results in an open jump shot, it is more likely to be a shot that is worth an extra point. Trae has actively improved his efforts and instincts on the defensive end of the floor. It just hasn't mattered much since teams can still super effectively target him and break down the entire defense with just the one mismatch. Now, as for the end of the floor that Trae is ostensibly great at, there is also a lot of criticism to be had. Criticism of his heliocentric playstyle, which, for those who are uninitiated, heliocentrism in the world of science means that the planets in our solar system revolve around the sun. The same concept applied to basketball means that the players and the team, and basically how everything works offensively, revolves around the one star, specifically a ball-handling guard. This is a playstyle we've seen reach major heights with the likes of James Harden and Luka Doncic. I didn't even mean for it to be a pun, but I like with the heights of the likes of Harden and Luka. I think when people refer to heliocentrism, they're also talking about the ball handling aspect of it. Like, technically the offense for the Warriors revolves around Steph Curry, but it's not The ball doesn't need to be in his hands for it to work. But even the best version of this offensive approach has only resulted in a finals appearance and almost beating the greatest roster of all time. That's not nothing, but the evidence suggests that this playstyle isn't all that great, even at its best, with much larger guards in the 6'5", 220 James Harden and 6'6", 230 Luka Doncic. In the case of Trae, he is doing all of this shit at 6'2", 165 pounds soaking wet. He is shouldering more offensive responsibility than anybody his size ever has since Allen Iverson. And the consequence of that is his wild inconsistency. It's already quite hard to be consistent with this play style. It's even harder when you can't see over the defense and you have to launch shots from way outside half of the time just to get an uncontested look. And weirdly enough, the inverse of the mismatch hunting issue is that teams are also way more willing to throw a wing onto a guard, meaning Trae is consistently seeing the best perimeter defender on each team, who is usually considerably taller and stronger than him. This playstyle is already a Sisyphusian uphill battle, and it's even more uphill when you're tiny and you have a Thompson twin breathing down your neck. As a result of this, the Atlanta Hawks so far this year have managed to be better on both ends of the floor without their star at the center of the universe. In his absence, the Hawks have adopted a more egalitarian, everybody eats offensive approach. You still have your top guy in Jalen Johnson, but beyond him, the shot distribution on this team is fairly even. You have 5 players taking double-digit shots, with Zachary Risachet taking 9.4, so we can round up and say 6, and that's not even factoring in the recent addition of CJ McCollum. They also have 5 guys averaging 3 or more assists. Contrast that to last year, where only 2 players aside from Trae averaged 3 or more assists. As a team, they are number 1 in assists per game, getting an assist on 72% of their field goals. So moving away from the heliocentric system, the Hawks have created an offensive flow where anybody can create at any point, and they don't have some massive weak link on the defensive end of the floor. And when I say massive, I mean massive. This year without Trae Young, the Hawks have a defensive rating of 114.2, with the league average being 115.7, so a little bit better than average. If this was the Hawks rating on the season, they'd be about the 12th best defense in the NBA. With Trae Young on the floor, the Hawks had a defensive rating this year of 129.8. I really need you to sit for a second with the gravity of that one. 129.8. What the fuck? The team with the worst defense in the NBA at the time of recording is the Utah Jazz, who have a 123.5 defensive rating. The Hawks, with Trae this year, were 6.3 points worse than that. That's the difference between the 30th ranked Jazz and the 20th ranked Clippers. If Trae played all year, the Hawks might have finished with the worst relative defensive rating in NBA history. That's how dire this problem got, and all of this comes back to his height. Look at the Dallas Mavericks after the most giga-brain decision in NBA history. As expected, their defense got a whole lot better without Luka, but the offense is bottom 5 in the NBA right now. Yes, heliocentrism is a questionable play style, but it's clearly still one that can reach great heights, but only if you have great height. What is the fundamental difference between Trae and Luka as players? Like, as far as skills go, there is very little difference. They are virtually the same. Similarly talented as passers, ball handlers, shooters from floater range. Both are very good at getting to the free throw line. Like, they kind of match each other skill for skill. But Luka is 6'6" and Trae is not. The game of basketball can be a really complicated sport, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's as simple as he's just too damn small. When we made the video that launched the deep dive era of this channel, the death of the power forward and who's next, I made the point that the shooting guard position in the NBA is dead. Many of you in the comments made a great point, which is that it was not in fact the shooting guard position that died, rather it was the point guard position. Shooting guards merely migrated to the point guard position and kicked out all of the real point guards in the process. Smaller, more traditional point guards have become virtually extinct in the NBA. We'll have a whole other deep dive out one day about true point guards, but I think it's clear as day that that concept has entirely died in today's game. Point guards now are expected to be both great passers and great scorers, and typically speaking, if you're a smaller guard, you have a major disadvantage as far as scoring goes. That's why we've seen guards like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander move to the point guard position. At 6'6", while shooting the ball as much as he does, in the 2000s, there is no way that SGA would be assigned at point guard. But in 2025, if you're a lead ball handler, you're basically the point. That's what has happened and still is happening for Devin Booker. Anthony Edwards is basically the point guard of the Timberwolves, even if they list Dante DiVincenzo as the point. Between them, Ant does all of the ball handling and passing, so he's the point guard. And now guys who would have surely come into the league as shooting guards or even small forward prospects are now coming into the league as point guards. Guys like LaMelo Ball, Josh Giddey, and Cade Cunningham, or less recently, Ben Simmons. This position that was supposed to be the haven for smaller players has gotten progressively taller and taller. Substantially so in even just a decade. The average height of a starting point guard in 2015 was 6 feet and 1.9 inches tall. The average height of a starting point guard this year is 6 feet and 4.2 inches tall. A difference of 2.3 inches, which I can attest is a really big number. Classic small dick joke. But if you subtract Trae and Ja from the equation, it is now 6 feet and 4.4 inches. Meanwhile, the average height in the NBA has barely gone up. Back in 2019, the average dipped from 6'7" to 6'6", primarily due to the adoption of small ball, but in the last 3 seasons, that number is back up to 6'7", this despite the NBA cracking down on inflated height listings in the last few years. Yes, point guards are getting taller, but really it's more like height in the league is equalizing. A player's position isn't defined by height to nearly the degree that it used to be. Obviously, to play center, you still need to be like 6'8 plus, but aside from that, if you're 6'6", you can play any position from point guard to power forward depending on your skill set. And increasingly, there are more and more players with a guard skill set as we are in the era of versatility. The best player for the Atlanta Hawks right now is Jalen Johnson. Hell, he might be better than Trae Young, period. I'd like a bigger sample size to say that with confidence, but my gut instinct tells me that he is indeed better. Jalen is a 6'9" power forward who can dribble the ball, pass with some of the best in the NBA, he's a prolific finisher and a solid shooter, and he can lock up on the other end of the floor. A decade ago, he'd be one of the biggest stories in the sport, but now, seeing such versatility out of a forward in 2025 barely even registers as that big of a deal. Don't get me wrong, I am not trying to undersell the talent of Jalen Johnson. What I'm hoping to illustrate is just how used to all of this we have become. It is now the norm in the NBA today for someone like Jalen Johnson to exist. It doesn't even register as different because it's not. These days, if I'm going to invest in a freakish athlete as my lead guard, why would I go with a 6'2" guy who can't shoot like Ja over the handful of 6'5" plus freak athletes that can shoot like SGA and Ant? Historically speaking, even beyond our modern context, Small guards have not been it. There are only 3 guards 6'3" or shorter who have ever been the best player on a championship team. Those 3 being Isaiah Thomas, Chauncey Billups, and Steph Curry. And I would argue that 2 of those players, Billups and Isaiah, were not even clearly the best player on those teams, at least not all of the time. The 04 Pistons got most of their success from the defensive end of the floor, where Billups was nowhere near their best defender, and the Bad Boy Pistons were another defense-first team, and Isaiah had another star guard next to him in Joe Dumars, who won Finals MVP in 1989 with averages of 27 points and 6 assists on 57% shooting. In fact, in that playoff run in total, Thomas only averaged 0.8 more points and 2.7 more assists on worse efficiency. Steph is the only guy who won a title while being leaps and bounds better than the second best guy, and he only did it twice, with one of them being against a heavily injured Cavs team. And that is the best shooter in NBA history. So the math checks out. Succeeding at the highest level with your clear best player being 6'3" or shorter is damn near impossible. Is this guard the greatest shooter in NBA history? No? Okay then, the data would suggest that he is probably not gonna get the job done. To be fair, scoring guards historically have not played the point guard position, but in the more modern era, high volume scoring point guards are quite prevalent. Hell, the other Isaiah Thomas averaged damn near 30 points a game in 2017. But the more recent examples have only amplified the concerns with building around a small guard. Now, you might be thinking, and probably throughout this entire video you've been thinking, well, what about Jalen Brunson? Yeah, Jalen is fucking awesome. At only 6'1", and some have even speculated he's shorter than that, he has averaged 26.6 points and 6.7 assists in a Knicks jersey. And he has led them to the playoffs every single year, which is especially impressive considering it's the Knicks. Last year, he even led them all the way to the conference finals, and they have aspirations of going further than that this year. But even in his case, I still have some concerns about him potentially limiting New York's ceiling. He's a better scorer than Trae and Ja by a pretty substantial margin, but I've also found that in recent years, he has had to carry the load offensively far too much. Though, if I were to be optimistic, I'd say that the players they've surrounded him with to bolster the offense are a whole lot better than the Grizzlies and Hawks ever managed to get. Cat is one of the best offensive players in the league, and Bridges and OG are both quite capable of creating their own shot. And even this best case is still lacking on the defensive end of the floor, which needs to be made up for on the wings, which has come at a hefty cost. The same cost that any team building around a player his size will have to pay. I want to believe that Jalen can be the outlier that gets it done. It would be very cool to see the Knicks win a title in the modern era. But my gut, and again an overwhelming amount of data, says that the Knicks ultimately won't get it done, even with the best case scenario, which Jalen Brunson is. The advantage that guards always had on the bigger guys was their skill gap. But now, the NBA is about skill more than ever before, and players are no longer put into boxes that affect their development. Fun story about me. I was 6'1" when I was 11. I was tied with like 2 other guys as the tallest person in my grade. So when I tried out for the basketball team in 2011, and I kept shooting jumpers because I desperately wanted to be the white Kobe, the coach told me to get my big ass in the paint. Go rebound and set screens, big guy. Leave the shooting and ball handling to the short kings. Nowadays, if you're a budding NBA prospect, you are going to develop every angle of your game. Yeah, there will be things that are more emphasized than others, but someone like Jalen Johnson will get a ton of ball handling reps before he ever steps foot in the league. Centers are now expected to make basic reads like all the time. It's not just something nice to have for a big to be a solid passer. Now, if a big can't pass, it's a real problem that gets exploited. Some of the most important skills in the game, previously ruled by the small guard, are more prevalent in everyone's game, regardless of position. I'm not saying Ja Morant or Trae Young are doomed to fail in the NBA for the rest of their careers. While there is virtually no evidence to suggest otherwise, the NBA is always changing, and the archetype of small scoring guards is relatively new in NBA history. The best short scorers in NBA history have almost all played their best years in the 2000s and onward, basically post Allen Iverson. One of the best things about the NBA to me is just how many different ways there are to win. People who rigidly define how you win in the NBA often have that shit blow up in their face, because winning in the NBA isn't a strict binary. I'm looking at you, Charles Barkley, but as time goes on, I'm finding it harder and harder to sell myself on any small guards being the #1 guy on a title team. Ja and Trae could very well possibly be phenomenal second options, and that would take a lot of pressure off of them, allowing their weaknesses to fall into the background again. But just going with my gut here, I think it's over for small guards. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you've made it to this point in the video. If you would like to support this content beyond just a like and a subscribe, we do have a Patreon available. Do a $3 a month plan, or there is a $2 a month straightforward paying it immediately $24 plan. An annual subscription for $2 a month. Some extra content early. Some parts of this video went up early for patrons. And you get access to a private Discord with some like-minded individuals, people who love talking about this game in a respectful manner. And yeah, I'm looking forward to 2026. This should be a new era for this channel where we're getting stuff out to you guys more frequently. So yeah, that's all I have to say. All of our patrons are on the screen behind me, or to the side of me, something like that. But yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye. The incense lasted exactly as long as it needed to.
Perfect. Dude, I clicked stop recording right before you said that. Damn it.
Oh, whatever.
It would have been nice because it truly went out as that sentence was exiting your mouth.